Hello and welcome back. Today we are so excited to have Radhika Lokur as one of our guests. As a little bit of background before Radhika introduces herself, Radhika graduated from St. Xavier's College and went on to get her MA from Yale University. After her time at Yale, she worked in Innovations for Poverty Action as a researcher and then went on to do consulting for ID Insight in Zambia for 3 years before Alex and I had the pleasure of meeting Radhika while she was at HBS. Radhika was in our section and we have benefited so much from getting to know her both in and outside of the classroom. And since HBS, she has been in product development with Meta. So Radhika, we are so excited to have you joining from London and get to hear a little bit about your journey.
Thanks for having me, you guys. You already introduced me so much. Do I need to introduce myself again?
Tell us a little bit about sort of like give us a little bit more on your background, what you studied in college. And then I want to hear more about Zambia and the research that you did post Yale too.
Yeah, awesome. So you've covered the high level, so I guess I'll go into a bit more of like details. I studied economics and statistics at Xavier's in Bombay, which is in Mumbai. And I guess I kind of knew that I wanted to go into international development. I didn't know what I wanted to do in international development. And that's because of the exposure you get living in India as a privileged person. And I think that's kind of where it came from. I really enjoyed the statistics part of it and wanted to see what I can do with it. And there was a history of people from my university going to Yale for this particular master's degree. So that's what took me to Yale. I also applied to some schools in the UK at that time as well, but eventually decided that the US was a better place for me to be actually because it gives you a post school visa to work. So it was a very practical decision. And if you know me at all, you know I'm a very practical person. So I went to the US for my degree and then ended up working with a research with the professor, Dean Carlin was his name. It's a company called Innovations for Poverty Action. They're very similar companies, the two I worked for. And I did research for 2 years where we ran randomized control trials and helped them publish research in peer-reviewed journals. And I liked the work that I did there. I learned a lot. My data analysis skills became quite sharp to my time there. But I realized that I like having interactions with people as part of my job, and there was very little of that as a researcher because I was just doing like data coding all day, and I missed having some of that people interaction because I'm also an extroverted person, and that gives me a lot of joy, which is what took me to consulting and like that side of the same industry. I moved to Zambia actually it was very random. ID Insight has offices in Lusaka in Zambia, in Nairobi, Kenya, and Delhi, India at the time that I joined anyway. And they basically gave me an offer, like, which office do you want to be in? And I said anywhere but India, because I was like, I can always go back to India. So they placed me in Lusaka. And honestly, it was the best decision ever. I met my future husband there. I had 3 amazing years of living in sub-Saharan Africa, in Southern Africa, traveling, just getting to know that space very well. I did some of the coolest things that I would never have done if I didn't live in that area, like climbing an active volcano in the DRC, seeing the gorillas, like doing lots of hiking, like kayaking in the Zambezi, where literally crocodiles and hippos are. I mean, I didn't know how dangerous it was before I did it, and I probably should have known. It was great, and it was the best time of my life. It was the best risk I ever took. And beyond that, that's when I kind of decided I wanted to do something different, and couldn't really figure out what the next steps were for me. Should I stay in development? Should I move into a different sector? And it was actually an introduction to tech through my sister-in-law, who was at Amazon, or still is at Amazon, and she explained what her job was. And then I realized that my skill set, it can be used in different industries as well. Like even A/B tests are basically randomized control trials. And that's something I didn't know before that. And so because of that introduction, that's kind of how I realized that, oh, okay, I could do something different, try out a new industry, because all of my work so far had been in the nonprofit space. So I used HBS to help me pivot into this tech industry. And I think in the long run, I want to combine these two spaces. Like I want to go back to like social impact and international development. But I think that the way to do that effectively in the future is going to be through technology. So I want to be well versed in both those spaces and eventually combine that. I think I'm still far away from it, but that's my long-term plan. Let's see how we get there.
Very inspiring long-term plan, and totally makes sense of being able to combine both of those experiences together. That's where the real impact can happen. Right now, it sounds like a great narrative. Did you have that kind of fleshed out when you were applying to business school, where you're like, yep, this is how I'm going to position this?
Not really, to be honest. Like, I think I applied before I had any kind of narrative like fully fixed in my mind. I think after I've applied, because when you're applying, there's just so much going on, it's really hard to pay attention to everything. I think after I'd finished my application process and gotten in, that's when I started thinking more seriously about, okay, what do I want to actually use this time for? And it was one of my recommenders actually. He was one of the C-suite of ID Insight, and he went to HBS like 10 years before we did. And he actually told me you should know what you want before you go, so you can focus your time better, and just have like some paths that you are trying to follow. And he said his advice to me was to use the summer before school to really reflect on that and be intentional about my time at HBS. So I appreciated that. I took that advice very seriously. So I spent that summer before really trying to think through, what do I want to do? How do I want to do it? I think that helped me. Like that helped me kind of clarify the narrative. And to be fair, like my essay doesn't actually, I think my essay does have something to do with tech and government, to be honest, or just like increasing the impact and scaling the impact. I don't think it mentions tech, but more like social impact at scale and how to do that, and like do that in a way that is kind of business friendly, because I see that as a much more sustainable long-term option as opposed to like aid-based impact.
I'm curious, once you had the idea in your head from your sister-in-law of like, oh, tech is where I want to go. We hear all the time, like, if you want to go into tech, you don't need an MBA, right? MBA is not necessarily relevant. Did you find that to be the case, or how did you see an MBA as a helpful way to get you to break in?
Yeah, I think that's actually very true. Like you don't need an MBA. So that, and one of the questions you had asked me to think about earlier was like, what's your advice to people who are thinking of applying, right? Like that actually would have been my advice, is really think about whether you need the degree. Because if you don't, it's a lot of money to pay for something that you don't really need. In my case, I was pivoting from a very, very non-tech background. I don't have a computer science degree. I don't have a business background. I work in even statistics, like that is like relevant background, but you need some way to get in the door. And I couldn't see one that was possible, or at least possible in a time frame that I was looking at. And that's why I made that decision to go through a business school. I did like really want to weigh the trade-offs between like, can I do this in any other way? Is there any other route possible? I thought about going into traditional consulting and then using that as a base to go to, say, tech. But those are really hard pivots. So in some way, I almost took the easy way out, the more expensive but maybe easier way out, and use the degree to pivot.
How long was your list of schools that you applied to, and how did you narrow that down?
I think I applied to 4. I applied to HBS, London Business School, INSEAD, and Stanford. So I applied to 4 schools. And the way I did it was, I kind of like, honestly, not a lot of logic. My boyfriend at the time now husband, was already at Oxford. So London Business School was kind of London and INSEAD were like, okay, we're close to Oxford. If I get into either of these, amazing. That makes my life much easier, because I knew I want to live in London after the MBA. I applied to Harvard and Stanford because I figured if you're applying to business schools, these are the best business schools in the world. And at this point, I already kind of knew finance was not my thing. So like Wharton doesn't make sense for me. That's not where I want to go. But HBS and Stanford kind of made sense in what I knew about the schools. So that's why I applied to those. Again, my rationale here, and that's kind of always how I think about things, is like, what's the cost benefit analysis? If I'm spending that much time and that much money to do something, I would rather get it, like have it be something that's worth it. I would not want to spend $200,000 on school that doesn't have the brand recognition or the things that I want to get out of it. So I chose based on that. I got waitlisted at Stanford, but I got into LBS, INSEAD, and HBS. I was very close to taking LBS, to be quite honest, because I didn't want to do long distance. I was like, we've done that before. I don't want to do it again. But that's when we had a conversation about it. And Tom, my husband, is like, you cannot say no to Harvard. And he was right. And that's how I ended up at HBS.
It's interesting. Certainly I'm hearing, and as part of your application journey, like the challenge, but also the benefit and the support of having a partner and having to negotiate that as you're deciding on the school. Like, what other challenges do you remember facing, or what were the parts of the application journey that stick out to you as particularly difficult or memorable?
I have a funny story for you guys. Okay, so when I did my GMAT, so I was supposed to apply the first round, and I had a GMAT booked for like May or something like that, April or May, and it was April actually, yeah. And I remember I went to Tanzania on a holiday, like we were in Zanzibar, and I was sitting, like everyone's being on the beach, and I'm sitting in this room studying for my GMAT, because the GMAT was like a week after this trip. It was painful. But I gave the GMAT, so this was I had taken a center in Lusaka. There's only one center. So it was like I was doing it at that center. There were 2 computers at that center. It was just me, I think, that day. There was nobody else taking a test that day. And halfway through, the power goes up, which means the computer shut down. So I ran out and I was like, hello, what do I do? The guy came in and he rebooted the system. I think the generator came on or something, but the computer had gone off. So they had to reboot the computer. And luckily, like, it had saved my progress. It hadn't lost everything. But obviously in that time, like, your mojo is gone, right? And I remember also having to go to the bathroom at some point, and there was like no toilet paper, or like the whole thing was just like, it was such a mess. Oh, I went back, did the test, I finished it, and I knew instantly it was like horrible. I think I got like a 640 or something in that test. It was so bad. And I was like, I left the center, and I think I cried for 6 straight hours. And my poor boyfriend then, like, he literally was like, we have to get out of the house because you cannot stew in this forever. And so I like took a break for a few months, and I did the test again. But I think that center has now shut down because I think I complained to the GMAT place, like, this cannot be a center, like, this is horrible. And in one way I feel bad because I'm like, there should be a center in Lusaka, but it needs to be better managed than that one. Oh my God.
Wait, so did you end up taking it the second time at that center still?
No, I went back to India because I was like, it's too stressful for me to do this again. And so I studied in Lusaka again, but I flew back to India for a week to do my test in Bombay. It was, oh my gosh. And it was much better the second time around. Thank God.
It's funny you're talking about the power going out. I felt like the lights went out in my brain halfway through when I took it. And I was just like, oh, this isn't good.
For anyone listening who found the GMAT stressful, that's a perspective shift. That's a different version of a test being stressful. It may have made for a good interview story down the line. Like, how do you respond under pressure? And it's like, sometimes you have to reset, get your head straight, and try again. If you look back, is there any advice that you would give yourself on how you would approach the application differently the next time?
I would have applied first round, and I would have put more time into applying first round, because I think it was quite stressful to apply to all of them for the second round. And it was all really bunched up. So I didn't give myself the space to do each application individually. I kind of did all of them at the same time. And that, I think, was a lot of work and a lot of stress while also having a job, which, I mean, everybody knows. Like, if you're trying to do two, three things at the same time, it's a lot. So I think that's what I would have told myself, is to start planning a bit earlier and do the first round.
What would you say are some factors that made your application stand out? And if any of that's particular, or especially in the lens of being an international applicant?
So I'm from India, which we talked about earlier, but like, I think the kind of stereotype from India is like engineering background men often. So the fact that I wasn't either of those things may have worked in my favor. But I think what also really makes my application stand out is that it's a very non-traditional MBA background. So from our class of 900 people, I think there were maybe like 30, 40, 50, like under 50 who had a social impact or kind of development background in the entire 900-person class. So I think that already, like, again, I'm making this number up. I don't know it for a fact, but I think that makes you stand out, which also means that in a section of 100 people or 90 people, there's not going to be that many people with your background. So I also thought about it from a perspective of, what am I bringing to the room, and what am I bringing to the discussion, as well as what am I getting from the discussion. So I think framing it that way was, I can be the voice kind of countering the finance pros to some extent, and I love the finance pros, but it's good to have a counter perspective to say, like, no, this isn't the only perspective that matters. You need to know the other side of the world and like how other people live, and get that perspective in. And that's kind of how I framed, I think, my essays as well.
What was your interview experience like with HBS? Did you do it via video? Did you travel to do it? What did that look like?
So I did my interview online. It was in my company's like conference room. I asked them if I could use the room, and I just sat there like waiting. It's like I had 3 devices with Wi-Fi attached to them in case the power went out, because I was like, if this happens. And my first statement before anything else in the interview was, the power may go out. If it does, like, I'll come back on, don't worry. So I think, like, just also laying the ground. And the person who interviewed me, I think, had lived in Africa somewhere or had some experience with it. So that also made it easier. It was actually it was a good experience. It was very conversational. And I think we talked about a book. I think we talked about Factfulness, Hans Rosling's book. Yeah, it felt very, I don't remember the questions beyond that, to be honest, but it was just like a very natural discussion. It didn't feel forced or, interviewee.
Yeah, I will say, I feel like the HBS interviews, especially, they try to make it more conversational. It's technically no question that you can't ask because it's really all about you. And so I think they try to make you feel comfortable, and I feel like they do a really good job with that. You had mentioned talking to Tom, then boyfriend, now husband, about how can you turn down Harvard? Was there anything else that helped HBS stand out over other programs for you, other than the international brand recognition?
I actually think for me it was the international brand recognition and the network size. Because for me, I knew that I'm gonna have a very international life. Like I wasn't planning to stay in the US. I don't know where I'm gonna end up with like the rest of my life. I might be in London, I might be in Australia, I might go back to India, I might be somewhere else. And for that, I think the brand name makes a big difference because everybody in the world is likely to recognize an HBS degree, whereas London Business School, for instance, doesn't have such good brand recognition. So for me, because I knew it was going to be an international life, like that made a big difference. If I knew I was going to be in London my whole life, LBS would have been fun, or INSEAD, for example, right? Because in Europe, these are very, very strong brands. But that was honestly the biggest thing for me. I also liked having a 2-year program with an internship in the middle. Because when I did my MA, it was a 1-year program, and I really missed. Like I felt the need to have an internship period because I couldn't get any work experience. It was just like school, and then apply for a job. And I found that really hard. So the 2-year MBA really just it felt like an important thing.
Maybe pivoting a little bit to what your experience like was once you got to HBS. If you had to go back and think of like 1 or 2 experiences that showcase or highlight what the experience was like or particularly fond memories, tell us about your experience at HBS. Did you enjoy it? What did you love? Maybe what didn't you love?
There was a lot of things I loved and some things I didn't love. Like I think I found it quite hard after living in a place like living in Zambia, working in international development, and then coming to a place like that's kind of the center of capitalism was definitely hard. It was a hard mindset shift. It was a hard like I almost felt afraid to be myself to some extent. But over time, like obviously I made friends. I met people who I felt like accepted that fact and weren't holding it against me. But I think it was just like a sense of, wow, I'm around some of the smartest people I've ever met, and it's incredible. Yeah, like I think it's quite awe-inspiring when you think about it, like as like you walk into the room with 90 people who are going to be your future friends, like network, your everything for so long, and then those 2 years of just all of that time that we spent together, it's quite magical. And if for a specific memory, actually, I think about our Nashville trip quite a bit because it was like a girls' trip to Nashville and just like bicycle pedal down the streets, which is it's so cliche and so kind of like ridiculous. It does remind me of the like lighter things in life and the fact that like we got to do some of those things before COVID shut us down. Like I really enjoyed that, like going on hikes with everybody, like because that's the person I am. Like I like doing the outdoor stuff, and it's a part of me that like I think we was able to explore more at HBS as well, which I appreciate. Like I like that people have multifaceted personalities, and the finance pros like hiking. I appreciate that, and I think that it's good to always see that side of people too. So that's it was a good lesson for me to also stop stereotyping people and put them into buckets of I won't get along with them because they're capitalists. It's not true. Now I work at a capitalist company. I'm one of them. So I found it was a good like reckoning for myself to say like people have different parts of themselves, and it's good to always give them a try and learn about that part.
I'm curious, did you feel like in the classroom, did you feel like that there was a balance of perspectives, or did you feel like it was really just sort of finance pro dominant?
I think there was a balanced perspective, but well, not fully balanced. I think there was opportunity for it to be a balanced perspective. I think our cases were skewed towards one perspective. I think that's how I would frame it. You could always say what you were thinking, and you could always speak your mind. So I think that was available. Whether people felt comfortable to do it or not, I think that's a separate question.
On the point of stereotypes, do you think there's any general like misconceptions or myths about HBS that you'd debunk, or stereotypes that aren't true?
People are nicer than you think. And even honestly, like I think the fact that I didn't always feel comfortable sharing my opinion says nothing about the people around me, but says more about my own insecurities or inability to talk about my opinion in that forum. But I think I think the thing that I would say is that people are much nicer than you think, and everyone is willing to listen, or at least the people that I met and I liked hanging out with. There's a lot more nice people than there are not nice people, I would say.
Now you're about 3.5 years post HBS graduation. So tell us a little bit about what you've been up to, if there's anything that you're applying from the MBA in your day-to-day.
I'll start with a few things that I wanted from my job. I knew that I wanted it to be big tech, and I knew that I wanted it to be in London. So those are the two things that I had pretty like these are hard limits. I am not going to move beyond these. So I started looking at companies in the UK that would be hiring, but no UK companies except like maybe consulting really come to campus. So it was a lot of self-motivation to go and find companies, make contacts, and build that connection to London. So something that I did that really, really helped was I created like the London trek with a couple of other people within our year. And we did like there's a New York trek, there's a Menlo Park SF trek where they go and you go and meet companies and have like introduction meetings with like different like big companies, small companies, VCs, etc. that are all in the tech space. So as part of the tech club at HBS, and I used that platform to create a London trek and created contacts at like Meta, Google, Amazon, and like a lot of VCs in the tech space. There were actually 4 of us who organized it, and everybody had like different pockets of companies that they had to contact. And we created like a 3-day trek where we met maybe 12 companies over those 3 days. And there was not a big group of us, maybe like 10 to 15 of us. And I think that was pivotal because it showed like, it had helped make connections in a place where I didn't have any contacts. And we leveraged the HBS alumni network for it. So the person I spoke to at Facebook, for example, at the time it was Facebook, she helped me like through the process, helped me understand what it looked like and, introduced all of us to the company. We had got a tour. So that was really important. And it helped us really understand what the application like timelines look like in the UK and what the process looked like. It was very different from the US. And through there, I got an internship, which then helped me get the full-time offer as well. So advice for anybody who's in HBS or in a school in the US and wants to go to work somewhere else, make some kind of a trek happen because people understand what treks are and they are willing to have students come over and visit the company. It's pretty low stakes for them. It's just like somebody coming to visit and they talk about the company, talk about internship opportunities. I think it makes a big difference if you can actually do it.
Did HBS have any involvement in helping you with the track or was it really just sort of more the framework of like, we've done this and then once you had the idea, sort of there was just you had a framework to follow and could go execute?
A bit of both, to be honest. So the framework existed, so it was much easier for us to do that. But we needed connections. So I went to the career center and asked for like CPD helped me find the right people to talk to and suggested some names. And so once I had those names, then I went and just like LinkedIn messaged them to say like, can we do this? So the names, like pointing out who might be a good person to talk to, like that was really helpful.
I think that's a great example of really using the resources that a place like HBS provides, tapping into that network, but also like the resources aren't just going to fall in your lap. Like there are so many that you can go after, but you should show some proactiveness to really like get the full value. So I think that's a great example. So yeah, you clearly leveraged HBS and its resources to help land the job. How are you, if you are, you applying what you learned in business school to your day-to-day?
I think 2 things that really I apply all the time. Like one is, I don't know if you guys remember this, but we did this like reciprocity thing pretty early on at HBS. I love that. And I still refer to it all the time because I think it is so true in anything that you do, right? Like it's always you give and you get. So I try to apply that in like if I ever want, because a lot of our jobs require like influencing people or, building relationships and having impact through other people. A lot of it also comes down to this, like you can't always be asking, you also have to be giving and you have to be like willing to be that person. And I try and apply that all the time. And I think that actually really helps in terms of like building relationships. I think your relationships are that much stronger when you're not only like taking and taking and taking, like you should be willing to give. So I think that's like one really big one. The other one is actually from a class. It was the strategy and technology class. And I think about some of the lessons taken from there all the time, like how a big company cannot do something that a smaller company potentially can and like how the markets react to that. I guess that one sticks with me more because I'm at a big company and I sometimes see, like I sometimes think about, would I want to work at a smaller company or would I want to stay in a company this large? And I think about those kinds of trade-offs and dynamics fairly often just because of the job I'm in. But that class is in general, if anybody's who wants to go into tech and goes to HBS, definitely take that class. It was with Yoffie, I think.
What's the HBS community like in London? Do you feel like you stay pretty connected to the HBS network? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yes and no. Like, I think I have of my section friends who I end up meeting with more often than not. But I think like the broader group, probably less so. And it's just my choice. Like, I think there are opportunities, but I think I like to do things like go for hikes or go outdoors. And I think that I kind of more gravitate towards people who want to do that. And that's how I want to spend my time. The community is strong. It does exist. There's like an HBS club here. Recently, I went to a lecture. It was like a dinner with UPIL. He gave like a lecture, or like he like spoke for 15 minutes, yeah, and then it was like dinner, which was really nice. Because like UPIL is like the economist at the Bank of England, and I took my husband who now works at the Bank of England with us as well. Just like it was very informal. It was just like a chat and then like dinner. But it was so nice to like have that option and meet people who were different years of HBS, and it was like lots like completely varying age groups. So it was quite nice. So I like doing things like that once in a while, but we don't do it often enough, to be honest. I work for an American company and half my teams are in Seattle and SF. So I do end up working evenings quite a bit.
That's so nice. I also feel like the professors are so excited, even though they're like very accomplished themselves. I feel like they're always so excited to interact with students or alums. So as we start to wrap up, any advice for any part of the process or experience that you feel like you haven't gotten to share with us yet that you think prospective applicants should know?
I think this is less so about the MBA application process and more so just about like if you're a career pivoter, like I was a pivoter, for example, I would recommend trying not to pivot on too many dimensions if possible. Like I think I pivoted on way too many, which is also why the last few years have been quite hard. I pivoted industry, I pivoted like job type, I pivoted on size of company, geography, like everything. And it was doable because HBS like lets you do that. And often business schools, obviously with your effort involved as well, will help you make that transition. But it doesn't always mean it's the best transition for you. So be very like considerate of and give yourself some grace. Like try to pivot maybe on fewer dimensions, at least like stay in a place you know, or in an industry but pivot the job type. That's kind of one thing that I don't think we covered, but I would recommend someone think quite carefully about, because yeah, you feel like you can do it and you definitely can. But should you? Like, I think that it's something that we should think about a bit more.
Well, thank you so much, Radhika. We've loved hearing from you and getting to hear your story from that angle. And it's just a reminder of like what a gift it was to have you in the class with us. So thank you so much. What an interesting interview with Radhika. I hope you all listen and it makes you appreciate whatever GMAT or GRE experience you had. But we want to dig into some of our takeaways. So to kick us off, I want to talk a little bit about what I think makes Radhika stand out as a great candidate and why she got into 3 of the 4 schools she applied to. I think it's also worth noting, Radhika she's born in India, comes from that's an incredibly competitive place to be able to stand out and to get into one of these top MBA schools. And I think what she did that helped her stand out from already a competitive field was twofold. One, I think she was really smart as far as her work experience to get work experience outside of India. So going to Zambia, working and getting global experience and also working in social impact versus an engineering background, which might be a little bit more common of what we see from people from that area. And then the other element I think that's critical that she did is she took the time and she did the 1-year program at Yale. So she got that sort of stamp of US approval. It could have been from a company, but she got it from a school that she showed her marker of competitiveness before applying. So I think that combination of global experience, working in social impact, and having that Yale marker before going to HBS, all of those things really help to set her apart when it's an uphill battle. What do you think, Alex?
I think she leaned into the social impact story as well in terms of her application and realizing that, social impact is a more scalable way long-term than just straight aid impact. And so I think realizing that if you want to scale that in a global fashion, you do need, MBA is a perfect degree to do that. And so I think that was a really great tie-in into like why the MBA. I think something that's also worth noting about Radhika is she was very intentional about her school choices. Geography was very important to her. She knew she wanted to be in London after business school. And the reality is the best way to do that is either going to a London-based business school or a brand that has international recognition such as Harvard or Stanford, and realizing that, the Harvard or Stanford brand can get her beyond just London as well. And like she said, maybe I'll be in Australia someday. Maybe, I'll be in South America. And so having that brand, that global brand recognition is really important and will open a lot of doors long term. And then, on the what can be learned from her experience, always budget time for multiple tests. Hopefully it's not a power outage that you experience, but you could just bomb the first one like myself and Julia did. So budget all that time for multiple tests. Ultimately, it ended up great. And she, got into HBS, and where we, of course, got to have her as a great friend. And
I mean, it made me smile. The moments that you have with your friends in the community. She referenced the trip that we took to Nashville. I think, those are the softer things you get out of an MBA, but those are, classmates and memories that are really special and we still talk and think about. So I certainly think that is an important call out as part of the experience, is the fun that you have with a really diverse group of people. Perhaps more practically, she went in knowing she wanted to live in London, and she was thinking early on about working and pivoting in tech, and she used an MBA to achieve both of those goals. And not only did she do that, but she looked in the HBS environment. She saw that there wasn't an easy way. There wasn't a ton of recruiting pipeline from London, but she learned from what they do with the Silicon Valley, the San Francisco track, and said, hey, HBS, I want to go do that with London, and used her connections and used the HBS network and name to help build that track herself. So for me, I think that combination of course, the community and the memories, but then being incredibly targeted and thoughtful and using the resources of a school like HBS to get exactly what she wanted. Hard to find someone more proactive and sort of effective in executing on their goal. What do you think, Alex?
HBS is incredible in terms of the multitude of resources you have at your fingertips, but it's also not going to fall in your lap. And so a little bit of that proactiveness is key to really make it worth your time. I thought it was a great interview and felt so lucky to be able to have her on the pod.
Thank you, Radhika.